All right, this is a demo on how to create a very simple rattle for our rattle unit. And here's some examples of what these look like. They can be spherical, they can be in soft geometric, cubes. And so as long as the forms are very simple, you can basically create any sort of formed rattle. The rattles have pre-fired beads in them, so when they're fired, they make this rattly sound. So to begin this process, we're going to start out with plastic clay. And you want to make sure this is fresh out of the bin, that it is really soft and bendable. If you try to use clay that is harder, it's going to crack on you in this process, and it's going to be really difficult to work with. So I'm going to do a few little moments of wedging, and wedging is a process to kind of continue to mix your clay and get out the air bubbles. So I've wedged that. I'm going to wedge this. It's a simple sort of spiraling technique. It's like kneading bread, but it's really to mix the clay particles further and to get out air bubbles. So now I'm going to try to make 2 evenly sized spheres. And you can just do this by patty caking. Or rolling it around on the table. And having them pretty close to being equal is good. If you have a really large and a really small one, it's a little bit harder to get your form together, but you can still make it work. Okay. So you start out with 2 relatively even-sized spheres. And then we're going to begin with the pinching process. And pinching is just really a simple process where you use your fingers and you just pinch to get your forms. So the first thing I will do is I will start out by putting my thumb into the middle of my sphere. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch a bowl. When I put my thumb in the middle, I want to make sure that there's just about that much space between my thumb and the end. One of the mistakes that beginners make often is that they leave too much clay here, and it's really thick here and thin on the sides, and then you have difficulties when you try to shape your form. So I'm making this look pretty easy because I've done a lot of these before. You might want to practice creating your pinch forms. You might want to go out, practice it a couple of times before you start. It doesn't magically always happen on that first attempt. And so now we've got one pretty evenly thick bowl form. So I'll put this aside, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to quickly do the same thing to this sphere. So again, push your thumb inside. Make sure there's about that much space from your thumb to the top of your ball of clay, and then you're going to pinch and rotate. Pinch and rotate. And you want to start at the base of the bowl rather than pinching these edges first. Wait until you work your way up. So another way that you can work on kind of working with that pinch and just evening out your sides is that you can put your thumb in the piece and roll it on the table. And now we've got 2 relatively even-sized bowls. So our next step in this process is we're going to get some pre-fired beads. These are already been fired, and so they should not stick to the inside of your clay. So you'll need, for a rattle that's going to be about 4 inches in diameter, about 15 to 20 beads. I'm going to put them in one of the bowls. So we're going to start like that. And now we're going to begin the slipping and scoring process. So with slipping and scoring is you're making rough marks in the clay. So you're really roughing that surface up. And we're going to do the same thing to the other side. One of the things I tell my students is that it's best when you're trying to put these two forms together to do this in one working period. Don't try to pinch these one day and then wrap them up and then try to put them together the next day. You really need to do it in one working day. So now I'm going to take some slip, which is liquid clay, and I'm going to put it on one side of my form. So now we're going to join these two pieces together, and this is where it kind of looks a little Frankenstein-y, but we're just going to make sure that we pinch that clay, spread it with your finger over the seam. It doesn't have to look really beautiful right now because we just need to trap the air pressure in your piece, and then we can form it much easier. So you can see that I've got that seam sealed. It's not beautiful, but now I can start rolling it on the table and smoothing a little bit more with my hands. At this point, you have created an intentional air bubble in the clay, and it works pretty well for us to shape our forms into soft cubes or spheres or kind of flattened forms. So at this point, you can gently form your piece by just patting it, or if you're trying to get something that's more cubed, you're just going to gently pat it down. If you're trying to go for a cube, it probably is better to try to form it on the second day when it sets up into that leather hard state. So let's say that we've done this. Now we can put our design on our rattle. And when your piece is leather hard, so I just formed this. This is very plastic, very smushy, still needs a lot of refinement to it. This piece is set up for a couple of hours, and it's a lot drier. And so when your piece gets to the leather hard state, we need to make vent holes in your work because we have an air bubble trapped in here. If you don't do this, your piece will explode in the kiln. So what I use is a paper clip, and I will put it in there and I give it a little wiggle. You don't want to make these really big holes because you don't want your beads falling out. And do this in several places around your form. If you do this too soon when it's in the plastic state, what may happen is your holes may collapse. So I usually wait until the end of the leather hard state, and it's a lot easier to do your designing with your excising and your incising and your stamping at the leather hard state, and also put in your air vents. So this is basically how to begin that rattle project. One thing to note, last thing to talk about, is keep on shaking it and moving it around so that you don't get your beads to stick to the side of your piece. They'll make a dull thudding sound, and that's perfectly fine. And then when you get your piece fired, you'll have the much louder rattling sound. And that is how you make a rattle. All right.